Thank you for joining this Amplifying Culture and Professional Development panel conversation. We're super excited to have you here and to have this important discussion. My name is Ian Storer. I'm the head of our Customer Advisory Board program and CXO programs at Box. And this event really came together because of the relationship that Steph, my co-facilitator, and I had at Box in a mentoring program that we participated in. And we were both in the office hours for the program, and Steph said something just kind of in the Q&A, and it was a bit of her story. And I don't even really exactly remember what it was, but I remember that I kind of took a leap of faith and just said, I'm going to reach out to Steph and see if she wants to be in that mentoring relationship with me. And so this was about a year ago, and the last year has flown by, and Steph's story has evolved, as has mine, and we've been part of a really interesting sort of relationship in that mentoring program together over the last year. And that was really the genesis of this conversation, and thinking about how do we tell that story and use stories to advance the cause of amplifying culture and professional development. So I'm just going to share a few housekeeping notes about this session and then hand over to Steph to continue the conversation. First, we are using the Q&A section of the Zoom Zoom interface. So please put your questions for the panel, for us, into Q&A, and we'll moderate as we go and take your questions as we're able to. Please also use the LinkedIn event page for comments and discussion. That's a great place to make sure that the conversation lives on and isn't just within this 60-minute webinar. And we will be sharing the recording afterwards online, so please share that when you see it. And I'll also be dropping some links into the chat for you to access links about the organizations represented in the panel and some other content that they've shared. And no surprise, it's going to be a Box folder link. So Steph, I'd love to just bring you up here and have you share your story a bit as a way of introduction, and then we'll continue the conversation.
Yeah, thanks for the intro, Ian. So as Ian mentioned, Ian was my mentor at Box, and initially how we met, I definitely felt the sense of imposter syndrome being Asian American, and also just being someone who was just recently new to Box as well. I've worked at Box for a couple years, but during that time, I just had no idea that Ian would ever want to be in a mentorship relationship with someone like me, because I'm at the bottom of the totem pole per se. So when Ian reached out, I definitely felt that leap of faith. But going beyond that, I've shared this my background at Box, and well, now that I'm at Zoom too. But for y'all who are new or know me, my name is Stephanie. During when I was at Box, I worked for a couple years, and during that time, it was really hard for me to come out with my story of being an almost foster youth. And I think during when I was at Box, one reason why I didn't come out with it immediately was because, holy crap, this is the furthest thing people could ever associate with in the tech realm for API members, because the child welfare system in the API community, there's just a huge stigma against it. And I realized, reflecting now on why that is because there is a huge discrepancy between working class Asians and then Asians who, may have been educated. And that was my case in my family, where, half my family members were not educated, and so I always had to help them out. I'm first gen as well, and the other half was educated, so whenever things arose, I would always have to step up and be pretty much a parent, take on a lot of responsibility. And so I was just so used to that throughout my entire life. And so coming to Box, I started learning about all these things, so this is what it means to when you see your colleagues get phone calls from their parents, because that was something I just never knew, and I never really had, because I just always had to step up. And then when things got really bad with COVID and API members getting attacked, that's what happened to me in Texas. I realized crap, I need to do something about it. I really can't keep this a secret. Not that I wanted to keep it secret, but I was also afraid of being homeless. And so getting connected to Ian, it really helped, because he made me reach out to other individuals. And so I was able to grow my voice and story tell to a small group of community members. And we had this Slack group box called Prayer Box. And so that's when I really begun to share. And so there was so much like beauty that came out of it. Like people started realizing like, oh, like I've known you for, 2.5 years, and like we would have never imagined, because you don't act. I mean, technically, like, I don't have this aggression or anything. And so people just like never really knew. And it was just like a whole new awakening. And from that, I just kept like reaching out to different folks, and eventually it got led up to Corey. And then now coming to Zoom, which I know I'll be passing back to the baton to Ian soon, but just coming to Zoom, like I've just seen so much beauty with it, with how by learning from folks at Box and outside the API community on how to storytell and be vulnerable, we started like Zoom Pact, which is the new Asian Pacific Islander community at Zoom. And I've just seen so many like people start sharing, and like it was basically like with all these attacks on Asian Americans, it gave me the confidence to say something and bring up, hey, like, is there a way that we can get together and just share stories? Because at Zoom, to give some context for folks who are outside joining in, we didn't have anything like built at that time. And so me and like my other API colleagues and allies, we just started making something very beautiful, and like started like formulating this, and it finally came to fruition. But anyways, like I just want to raise awareness about foster youth and how like this is a much needed area, even outside the API community, and how like adult adoption is a thing, because that's what I'm really looking for. And I hope anyone who's joining the call today can really learn and take away from, and help contribute to this area. So passing the baton back to Ian.
Thanks, Steph, and thanks for sharing your story. And great to see some love coming from folks like Joe that we know in the group here. So I want to just invite Corey to join us and step up here to maybe reflect on how stories like Steph's and many others kind of we hear those stories, and it's important to tell those stories, but then often action doesn't follow the story. And I think it's one of the reasons we asked you to join here, is because Box and you in your role, and I'll let you introduce yourself and your role in a second, are taking action and setting up programs in response to stories like these. So we'd love to hear about that, and kind of what you think causes that, or is the trigger from hearing a story to taking action. And hopefully that's something that we can start to tease out in the rest of the panel today, is how to make sure that action follows stories. So maybe you could just share a bit about that and some of the programming at Box going on this year and this month.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ian. Yeah, so stories. I love stories. I have 2 little kids, and stories are big in our family. For those of you that I haven't met yet, my name is Corey Conrad, and I'm the VP of Communities and Impact here at Box, and also the Executive Director of Box.org, and have had the joy of sharing and you mentioned Joe in the comments, and Joe too. So big inspired stories. I think Steph's is a wonderful example. Here at Box, we think of community with kind of specific kind of groups or active kind of community areas that we want to get involved. And so it's Boxers, our employees, it's our customers, and it's our partners, our vendors, those we work with, those in our community, not because but that we as Box now, just shy of a year, I think we're at 9 months. And as I listen to our Boxers, as I listen to our customers, I'm looking for areas where the strengths of Box can really meet needs in our community. And one of the areas, since Steph was talking some around foster care, that I'd love to talk about a little bit today is specifically child welfare. Excuse me. And so when we look at the areas where the strengths of Box, and for us, we talk about our differentiators with security. We're the content cloud, so we can keep your content, whatever tools you may use, whatever software you may use to get your work done, to secure that and keep it secure in the content cloud. To provide collaboration both internally and externally, and then to integrate with all the different tools that you might use. And one of the areas where in our communities where we see this need and see through our customers that it's really making a difference is child welfare. And so, examples like moving off of paper-based processes into the cloud that are providing efficiency gains. When we think about the return on the investment, right? Like powering efficiency and productivity for our customers, that's fantastic. And when it's in child welfare, that can literally mean children moved out of dangerous situations more quickly. It can mean foster families getting through application processes that used to take 6 months much more quickly, in days or weeks, which again can directly affect the lives of these children in our system. And so, we're really interested in outcomes, and we're really interested not just in the number of nonprofit customers or the number of volunteer hours that Boxers have done, but kind of the so what does that power? And that's where I think stories like Steph's, like what difference has that made in the life of an individual? What's that human connection that we can listen to with empathy and curiosity, and then support with a community mindset through the work we're each doing every day here at Box. So that's a little bit about kind of some of the framing that we use to think about it. And I'll just, maybe one final comment on this before, if there are any other questions, I'm happy to answer them. But just thinking about the courage that it takes to be vulnerable and to share our stories. And so, I think, Steph, thank you for your bravery in sharing some of your story that has inspired action. I think this is where, as we think about, yes, the customer side of things, but where it gets really, personal is with our Boxers and the stories that they share. And so, again, thinking about child welfare in particular, we've been blessed with stories like Steph's, but also those of foster parents that are Box employees, or Boxer employees who were foster children and had been through the child welfare system, and what opportunities and challenges that they saw, again, where the strengths of Box could help better meet some of those needs. So yeah, it's a community effort, and that includes our people, our Boxers, our customers, and our partners, maybe former Boxers who have gone to other companies now and are continuing to drive forward this important work in our local communities.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Corey. And thanks for joining to share that story as we continue telling the story together that we're all part of. Steph, do you want to maybe close out this section sharing a bit more about Zoompact, and then we'll get into our panel discussion.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, what was beautiful of what happened at Box and how I learned from our, from Yui and then also from other Boxers there, it really gave me the courage to, hey, just haphazardly, hey, try this idea out without thinking too much into it. As I mentioned at Zoom, we didn't really have anything set up yet at that time. And so whenever I raised that question, we had 2 sessions, and then we also had a lot of other API members come forth with their stories. And it was literally a tear-jerking session, but it was really needed, and it was just so beautiful. And it just instantly made, in my opinion, and I'm sure others as well, a safer environment. And so what really touched me at Box was, because I didn't know at the time, but just to give some context, I didn't reach out to Corey directly with my story of being an almost foster youth. I learned from Zoe Pennington, if she's on the call, sorry for calling you out, but she let me know, hey, you inspired this movement, and it really just touched me that it went somewhere. All this pain that I felt throughout my entire life, something happened because of it. It wasn't just swept under the rug. Oh, yeah, you went through this traumatic experience. Great, good. Sorry, you feel, sorry this happened to you, bye. Because in the social welfare system, that's just how it is. But back to Zoompact, we hope to emphasize on this area more and, bridge this gap, because a lot of API members go, they get it, just they're not very much recognized in the system. For one, as I mentioned prior, to give some context, we are our own worst enemies in a way too, because there's this cultural comparison thing. And that's why I'm trying to give back to the community as well. And I just want to give a quick shout out to the people that I mentor, because one of them is an API member, but I mentor Connie and then Joanna, but they've helped contribute to this, those API talks that happened at Zoom. And so again, this has just been something like so beautiful that's happened, and we hope to, you know, spread this impact beyond Box and Zoom into other like tech companies and nonprofit realms as well. But without further ado, you know, I'll get past the panel, pass it back to you.
Well, let me quickly introduce the panelists and let's get into it. We have just under 45 minutes and we've got about 2 hours worth of content to cover. So I want to introduce and bring up to the screen here Arabella DeLuco, a longtime friend and collaborator of mine in various ways, who is the founder and CEO of WeExcel and many, many other things. And we'll find out more about Arabella. Sarah Angel Johnson, CIO at Save the Children, a CIO at many other incredible organizations with a long career in tech. And we're excited to have you here to talk about your career and how that's progressed and the work you're doing in a variety of ways. Adam Mitchison, co-founder CEO of My2B, which is actually the mentoring platform that connected me and Steph. And has his own personal story that we'll hear about in a moment about mentoring that brought him to create My2B. And then finally, but by no means least, Nehemiah Stewart, who I met at Box. He was here. He's an entrepreneur, so he was at Box for a hosted pitch competition, but he's also a student, recently graduated from UNC, and doing some incredible work with Level the Playing Field, and I'll let you share more about that. But we have this incredible panel here today to talk about this a series of issues underlying how we amplify culture and build a diverse professional pipeline and professional talent pool in this country. So Steph, why don't I hand over to you? But before I do that, say thank you to Corey for joining us. Thank you to all of you in the audience here who are here for the conversation. Or if you're watching afterwards on the recording, and let's have a great discussion.
Yeah, so Arabella, we're going to start with you, but if you want to give background to your story, that'd be perfect.
Thanks, Steph. Thanks, Ian. So I'm the founder, as Ian said, of weexcel.org, and what we do, our mission is through storytelling, we uplift diverse voices to empower future generations. And I started this organization a few years back because I really believe in diversity. And that's because I'm an immigrant. I immigrated here to the United States from the Philippines when I was very young. And, you know, like many immigrants, I didn't feel brown woman immigrant. I didn't feel like I had a sense of belonging. And so what I learned going back into the topic of mentorship is, you know, mentors actually, I stopped looking for people who look like me and who are like me to mentor me, because I just realized as I grew up that that's just not going to happen, because especially when you're a woman of color and you're an immigrant and you're going through you're in a very different path than everyone else. Oftentimes you're leading the way and you're forging that path. And for other people who are more like me, you know, I like to tell them, hey, you know, don't worry. You can find a mentor like, you know, Steph found in Ian. And so that's one of the reasons why I founded WeExcel, is to really help people connect through their stories. We say passion, purpose, and story. That's what we unite through passion, purpose, and story, and together we excel. So I really believe in that. So thank you, Steph, for sharing your story, because I think when people hear that, it helps them understand that that you're human and they can relate to you no matter where they're from.
Thank you for sharing that, Arabella. Okay, and then I'm gonna pass it on to Adam to share his story.
Steph. So yes, I'm the CEO, co-founder of My2B, which is online mentoring and development platform, which helps scale mentoring across organizations. Box are a client of ours, and it was through that platform and that program where Steph and Ian connected. And I think we will talk about mentoring and the power of mentoring all day. You know, it's what we do. It's what we live and breathe. But even sometimes we take a step back and are blown away by the stories. And I think the fact that Steph found the courage to tell her story through mentorship via our platform was hugely humbling for us. And it's that realization of that's one story from one person within an organization. How many other untold stories are there out there? And just to go back to the founding of My2B, I came from the corporate world. I was working at BNY Mellon and Bank of America, and I was trying to understand the career path that I had available in front of me. And I only really got the answers through a mentorship, through a mentoring program. It created networks for me, it created opportunities for me, it opened doors for me. And it was life-changing because the environment I was in at the time was actually quite a toxic department. It was very stressful, and my colleagues didn't have access to what I had access to. And the reason was purely scale. So I realized that technology would be the answer to this, to help that and create those equal opportunities so that everyone has access to it. And our work, fast forward to our work with Box, the focus there was around developing underrepresented talent. And going back to what Arabella was saying about, you don't necessarily always have to look for or connect with someone who is what would you perceive as a version of you. That's one of the best things that's come out of that program, and that situation was the allyship, because it's created that awareness for people. It's helped them understand the unique challenges faced by those people. And I think, we talk about diversity. I think there's some very obvious situations with diversity. But Steph, your story opened our eyes, because we never thought that would have been something that you wouldn't have the courage to share, because we wouldn't have thought of it as a stigma. But that's because we've not been through that situation. So we've learned through that through you. So we thank you for that as well.
Great.
Thank you.
Let me now ask Sarah if you would share your story, and just for a few minutes, kind of give us a sense of the journey you've been on in your life and your career.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ian. Thanks, Steph. So a bit of my cultural and professional story. I am 100% Japanese, but my family has lived for 5 generations in Hawaii. So I'm more Hawaiian by culture. And Steph, your story really resonated with me, especially as a fellow API constituent here. I am in our community, there is this divide. And I also come from very humble beginnings, and I'm a first-gen college grad, so on and so forth. So I just thank you for sharing, Steph. Your story really resonated with me. In terms of my professional career, tech is actually my second career. My first career is I'm a dancer. So Polynesian ballet, hip hop. I'm a professional salsa competitor for 11 years. And opened up my own dance studio. So that's just a quick fun fact. Tech is my second career. And it may seem like random choices in my tech career, but every step has been intentional, really focusing on my strengths as a change agent. For example, I started as a coder, then I went into HR to stand up diversity programs, then back into tech as a manager, then as an executive at IBM. I actually stayed with IBM for 17 years and then made, again, an intentional career decision to move to nonprofit because I want my life legacy to be social impact at scale. And so I took my first CIO positions at multiple NGOs and now at Save the Children for about 6 months. I'm happy to answer questions about my journey, decisions, lessons learned, for-profit versus nonprofit, a woman in tech, an Asian executive, mentoring, work-life integration. Let's go there. I'm divorced, I'm remarried, I'm divorced again. I'm a single parent of 3 girls. I can talk all day long about my lessons learned there.
As I said, we could talk for 2 hours. And that's a good reminder for everyone who's here now to please feel free to use the Q&A function and ask whether it's Sarah or anyone else in the panel questions. And we'll get into some of that, Sarah. I don't know if we can cover all the aspects, but thanks for sharing that story. Nehemiah, please unmute and share your story, the journey you've been on for us. Thanks.
Yeah, of course. As I listen to the panelists ahead of me, I'm almost bashful in beginning myself. This is a talented array of individuals. And Sarah, I gotta say, we need our own 2-hour discussion after this. But as Ian mentioned, my name is Nehemiah Stewart, and I was raised in Southeast Washington, D.C. True enough, I graduated from undergraduate 5 weeks ago, and I'm currently a first-year medical student preparing for my MD PhD while I receive both degrees. My role, I guess, in this university, rather than academia, is, as was mentioned time and time again, to catalyze change. I found out there last year after the murder of George Floyd that I was called upon by our chancellor at UNC and other administrators at NCCU, which is an HBCU in North Carolina, and a few other institutions, where they said, Nehemiah, we seek to do something, but what can be done? What will you do? And of course, I'm sitting back, well, what can a 20-year-old do? What chance do I have to eradicate centuries-long instances of generational biases? How can I ever help? But then I sat back and began to integrate my thoughts alongside of admin and faculty and corporations like Box.com and Merck. And I realized that what was needed was, along with mentorship, rigorous training, recruitment and placement of minority individuals into positions of influence. And so thereby I formed level the playing field, and we've scaled rather well, but more so we've changed lives. And that, to me, I guess at age 21, I realized that that's what I like to do. And each of these panelists on the call, that is what they do. And I'm guessing that each individual who's watching this panel is seeking to do that same thing. So I'm excited to begin this conversation about how we can actually execute change instead of just sitting and discussing it, which, as Ian mentioned, is a common pain point at our current stand. But thank you.
Thanks, Nehemiah. So we want to move now and continue telling these stories, but talk about the stories that you're each hearing from your community, and maybe start to peel back the layers and figure out, what are the stories that are being told today, and then we will start to talk about the stories we want to tell and we want to see driving that change. So Sarah, back to you. I'd like to invite you to share your story as an executive in large companies and large NGOs. What are you hearing in that context? And maybe a little bit about some of the things that you've observed. I know you have a lot of wisdom to share on the things that have worked for you and for others around you, and you have some sort of frameworks and other things maybe you could share as you think about how executives and companies and different levels of management are kind of working through some of these issues of ensuring that we amplify diversity in the culture and in the talent in all of our organizations.
Absolutely. So one of the best stories of recent to tell here is around a group of CIOs that came together last year that I'm a part of. To name a few: CIO of Estee Lauder, Ralph Lauren, Deloitte, Boeing, MetLife, myself, and a few others. With the horrifying events of last year, this year, the CIOs said, if we want diverse talent within our organizations, we should be stepping up to the plate ourselves. And so we created a nonprofit called TechPack. So techpack.org, as soon as I stop speaking, I can put it into the chat window there. So you can go check it out. It's fairly new, but we're hoping to be a force multiplier for diversity within technology organizations and just in general, because imagine the power of all of us coming together and synergizing all of our learnings. And we're focused in 3 areas, right, around recruiting talent. So representative candidate pools, interview panels being representative, questions being representative. I mean, start right from the very beginning when you're bringing talent into the organization. And then developing talent, leadership programs, professional networking, mentoring. I actually have a formula around mentoring that I found has worked for me. Say it quickly, because I know we're tight on time. But there are 4 kinds of mentors that I found work for me. And I know that Adam is going to also talk about it more, and that Ian and Steph have had their success stories. So I'm just thrilled that there is such a focus right now on mentoring. I've always had a peer mentor, because then they can give me direct feedback when we're interacting in the same environments, and you multiply your networks. Then I have a next step mentor. I have multiple next step mentors, because they're people whose roles that I could see myself in next, and they give me like a formula to get there and how they got there and lessons learned. And then you open up doors for like your next step in your career, because if they leave, you're hopeful that, oh, they're going to advocate for me to take their role. And then I always have a career mentor. These are people who are advocating for me in circles where I am not, right? So maybe it's a board that I want to be a part of or something like that. For me now, before it was in the C-suite. And then I always have reverse mentors. The world is changing so fast. I can't keep up with it. My 17-year-old is one of my reverse mentors. She knows more about her phone than I do, and she doesn't know it. So that's in very quick, concise terms, my mentoring formula. There's so many ways for us to take advantage of mentoring. And then culture, right? Community, allyship, the employee resource groups that I've heard, like Box starting and in other companies. And some of the larger companies, they're evolving because they've been around for a while, decades. And some other companies, smaller companies, NGOs, I'm so thrilled to hear about this for Box. They're new, brand new. So like even in Save the Children, we're standing up our first EAGs. So that's really the conversation that's happening that I'm hearing right now at the CIOs.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sarah. We actually have a question from the audience. So why don't I just jump in with that before I hand over to Steph for the next question. But from Nihal. Hi, Nihal. Good to see you. What's the most compelling original way you've seen diversity pay dividends towards your firm's mission? So I'm going to make that an open question. Anybody who wants to jump in, but Sarah, since maybe you could start.
Yeah, I'll tell you specifically how IBM approached this. And this is all the way back in the 90s. And this is when I was standing up the first diversity councils and employee resource groups for IBM. We approached it from a mission critical business foundational piece. It wasn't just the right thing to do, because it is, but it's also critical to your business. So that way you're addressing unconscious biases in your actual products and solutions. You're also then addressing from a personalized way, the customers that you're selling to. There's $3.7 trillion of diverse buying power at that time, 2 decades ago. And so we really started to look at how do we create this conversation and really target and personalize how we were looking at our customer base.
Did I see a hand go up? Arabella, please go ahead.
Yeah, Sarah, thanks for all that information. It's really incredible to hear from you and your experience. So for me, we work with multiple corporate partners like Autodesk and Logitech. And one of the things that I've seen really successfully is that, when diversity is brought on, not just by the HR department or the diversity director, but through other departments or organizations within the corporation. And for example, Logitech, this shout out to Chelsea Sim, she's the head of marketing for their global marketing for their creators for BIPOC. And in 2020, when George Floyd was murdered, Chelsea, who's a white woman, felt like she needed to do something about her position in a corporate, as a corporate professional. So she put together a proposal, and she went all the way up to Logitech because she was part of a smaller group that was just called Streamlabs. It was a startup that was bought out by Logitech. And Chelsea said, I want to pledge $1 million over the course of 10 years to give to BIPOC creators. And Logitech loved it so much. And if you look at their products, right, they in terms of their user base is getting more and more diverse, and that as a digital divide closes up, right? So this is something like their contributions to my very small nonprofit that I started from nothing has enabled us to mentor a future generation of Black and Latinx 4th grade girls in the Bronx. We were able to teach them through Zoom remotely, self-discovery through filmmaking, through a 9-week program. And we brought them Tribeca Film Festival winner filmmaker from LA. Then we brought them a WNBA player, Monique Billings, who is also a YouTube creator. And just because of that incredible gift that Chelsea felt compelled to really bring up to the top of Logitech. And then also with that money, we were also able to create a whole video series on mental health around one of our creators, Gabriella Dei, who was Miss Wisconsin USA 2020. She had no money, guys. She was in television news after Miss USA competition, had no money. And yet, because of the program that we created around her mental health wellness series, she was noticed by Logitech. And now she's a corporate storyteller for Logitech, making over 100 Gs. That's what I'm talking about, like the kind of dedication and the kind of culture that comes from individual, independent corporate professionals like you at Box and Zoom is so important to the communities that you serve. And I really want to say that out there.
Thank you, Arabella, for sharing. I'm just gonna build off of what like our original items too, because like we already have you on the line too. Can you tell us like what's the greatest need in storytelling, and also like that you see within the arts and education realm, and then how do people like take this aspect in the workplace, and how do we learn to be more vulnerable with our stories?
So the greatest need is to be able to tell someone that your story matters. And we're all, we all use technology. Box is an incredible resource for, incredible tool for us. Zoom is an incredible tool for us. And by using these technologies and understanding how they can actually help bring us together so that we are able to tell our stories, is super important. For me, it's like starting young, the future generations. We also mentored a formerly incarcerated young man named Ornell Caesar, and we put together a whole program around him where he was able to talk about D3 JavaScript libraries, utilizing prison reform data. He's now fully employed because his story, he was able to showcase his thought leadership. So I think that in terms of anybody, it doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, your story matters. And if you're able to tell that and share that to people, you're going to touch other people's lives. Believe in that.
Amazing.
It's beautiful to hear. So Nehemiah, maybe I could ask you to talk about the stories that are coming out of the community that you're part of, which is the university college community, in terms of the work you're doing with Level the Playing Field. Say a little bit more about that conversation and what people are sharing out of the organizations and the universities that are part of that effort, and kind of what we should be aware of from that.
Of course, Ian, I consider it an honor. When I say being raised in Southeast Washington, D.C., sometimes individuals don't quite understand what it means to really be raised in an environment where treating drug addicts and seeing drug addicts was a commonality. Living in a home where violence was the only answer at times is a commonality. I don't think at times it's understood when individuals come into those like Steph, the imposter syndrome and the like, how debilitating it can be. So as I revolve this kind of side script back into what the insatiation is of this conversation, what are the true definitive problems within higher education? As I look at each department, as we begin our discussions early on in 2020, a lot of it was around, how can we bring in funding? How can we just redirect and misdirect ourselves? And I said, well, how many individuals have you talked to the students? Have you talked to their parents? Have you actually sat down and had the open conversations with those who are actually going through this? Or are you at such a high level that you're forming these ideologies and plans that might or might not actually help a soul? Have you spoken to the student who's struggling through classes because he or she is working 2 jobs, which I was? Are you speaking with an individual who is caring for grandparents at home and who also just lost a loved one due to gun violence, which I had many times before? Had you had these open dynamics and conversations where students felt free and able to learn because their at-home environment was stable? They had not. So as I look at the definitions and rather defined problems within higher education, if you seek to help in this sphere, for those who are on the panel, it begins first off with breaking barriers between what it means to be first a student, an administrator, a parent, or a human being. Breaking this continuum of who this is, from CIO to CEO to low-level employee, if you want to bring it to the industry sphere. It's breaking the barrier to allow a full conversation where it's true that you can speak forward and feel comfortable to say, this is where I come from. This is how I was raised. And this does not deteriorate or rather detract from what I'm able to do. And by forming these, I should say, spheres of information or spheres of space, where those like myself, those like Arabella, and those like the rest of us can feel free to share this, now I come to class and I'm a little bit more energetic. Now our teachers are a little more understanding. Oh, your assignment's 30 minutes late. I understood that you were taking care of your parent. How can an individual like myself hope to ever make it to higher education if we can never make it through primary and secondary beforehand? Do we not understand that in so many cities like my own, in so many rural areas like those I'm not even from, there's not even access to continuous mentorship like this? There's not even access to true rigorous education. So how could we ever make it to higher education? How can we ever make it to the 100K level job if we can never make it beyond the primary border? So truly, it's breaking the barriers between each level. It's helping individuals understand that you exist on this continuum of a human being. You're developing, sure, to become this, but you already can be and are that. Just because of what you came from, because of your last name and your first name, which no one can pronounce most times, and you're one of the very few, I should mention. Because of these things, it does not take away from who you are. And if we can truly implant these social seeds, these seeds of confidence, these seeds of can do within our youth, wow, you've got a generation right there that can really make change. These are the thought leaders. We are the thought leaders, but we don't have the confidence. We don't have the confidence because we see those above us and we're scared to speak out. We're scared to come on panels because what if they find out? What if, like Steph mentioned, what if they find out I'm different? What if they find out I didn't know how to sit at the table and use a salad fork and dinner fork? And honestly, I still know the difference, but I can sit there today and communicate. Now that's, not to go on a tangent, our time is short, but that is truly the defined problem in higher education. Yeah.
Thank you, Nehemiah. Powerful and wise as always. So thanks for sharing. Steph, do you want to go on to the next question?
Yeah, of course. So Adam, we're going to continue with you. Like, what are you seeing from employees and employers? Like, how are they responding to like mentoring programs? I know Corey touched a little bit about it, but like in general, that like, what is your perspective, and also this in general, what you're seeing?
So the thing with mentoring is where it falls down sometimes is people don't know where to start. It can often be part of someone's job, or it's added onto their plate as an additional responsibility. And then they start going through all the usual questions of what does a mentor look like? What does a mentee look like? How do we vet, who comes through the system, and how do we decide how many people for this is for, and things like that. So where we come in and where we help with that is that we generally get involved in that early conversation. We alleviate that stress, we alleviate those fears and answer those questions for them. So that's exactly what we did with Box. When we spoke with Box the first time, we just sort of put the tech to one side and said, what is the problem you're trying to solve with mentorship? What is the root cause of this, the desire to have mentorship across the organization? And for them, it was that focus on developing underrepresented talent. And it touches on all the 4 personas that Sarah mentioned, the different types of mentorship. And I think one of the beauties of scaling mentorship is that it's always going to have the elements of those different things, from career mentorship to helping people progress in the career, to also the reverse mentoring. Every relationship has that element of reverse mentorship. I think one of the biggest outcomes we saw from the Box program is that the realization of people understanding what's on the other side of the coin, what these people are going through on a day-to-day basis, that I was not aware of, that I was not exposed to, that I can now create opportunities for and open doors for, because I'm in that position and I'm able to do it. And I think the most powerful thing from mentorship is that progress. It's connecting people on a human level. It gives that safe space, that confidence for people to share their story. You're the perfect example with yourself and Ian. Having that confidence where it's not your manager, it's maybe not your parents, it's not people at home. It's someone where you can go to them in a safe space and have a conversation. And again, one of the things that people try and understand with mentorship, and they try and get their head around when they are maybe put forward by a manager, or they're thinking about becoming a mentor as part of the program, they're unsure because they've never done it. Mentoring is all about experience. So every mentor has the ability to just listen and understand based on their experience, and help based on their experience. It doesn't have to be necessarily like coaching. I think this is where the differences lie, in that coaching can be more methodical, more thought process driven, whereas mentorship is based on experience. So you can only really offer any advice and things like that through your own experiences. And that's where reverse mentoring is exactly the perfect example that we mentioned there with Sarah saying about her 17-year-old is teaching her about what's going on in the world now, because that's exactly it. That's where we learn, because they're immersed in it. They have the experience that we don't have. And from the corporate perspective, what we're seeing more of now is people, I think going back to diversity and looking at what people are doing with that, is diversity is finally at the center of the table. You know, it's been something people have talked about, and there's been a lot of lip service for a long time around it. There's been a lot of policies around diversity, but people are now actually putting markers down, and they're actually starting to take action. And this is one of the major things that mentoring can contribute to, because it can actually demonstrate, when you're saying your company vision is to, say, make 20% more executive roles to people of color. If you have a program that's driven towards that, it will show that action, it will deliver on that action. Whereas for such a long time, it's just been policy or just an idea. Now it's starting to become actionable. And that's one of the things we do with companies. We help them take that policy and turn it into an action. And that's where the diversity side of things is really becoming powerful, because it's demonstrable, it's demonstrable from the results and the outcomes that we see. And again, this is where, when we go into a company or an organization, we start with the conversation and say, what is it you're trying to achieve? Like, what's the main goal of this? What's the parameters? What are the things that you want to get out of it as a result of a program? And then that's then applied to the technology, which is the scale side of things, and helps deliver it. And the results speak for themselves. We've seen some absolutely incredible results with Box and other clients as well from that. Whether that is a leadership development, whether it is just the broader understanding. And I think, going back to what Nehemiah was saying, there's like the education side of things. I think the first step for everyone is awareness. I think getting that barrier out of the way and going, this is what's going on in the world. This is what your colleagues go through on a day-to-day basis. Having that understanding is one of the safe space of a conversation with a mentor, is where that can create that, and then they can, create awareness and create opportunities and open doors for that. Sorry, I mean, I know we are short on time. I could speak about mentoring for days, never mind hours, but that's like probably the biggest impact that we've seen through it.
Perfect. We do have a follow-up question. We'll get to yours, Joe, after, but we do see a question where, how can mentoring be extended to people who are maybe not of color, and without excluding individuals?
I mean, if you're not part of a formalized program, whether that's with an organization or a company, I think one of the beautiful side of things of mentorship is just reach out and ask. And I think start with your network, start with who you know, where you can. And you don't have to formalize it to begin with. You can just reach out for a conversation, just saying, you've got this experience around whatever it is you're looking for. Can we have a chat? Can we have a coffee? Start it informally in that sense, but reaching out, there's absolutely no harm in reaching out to people. You don't have to know them, but I think when you can start with someone, it's that comfort zone. There's a bit of an element of, you can just at least start the conversation, and then it can progress, and you can, if you want, you can formalize it. And obviously, if anyone's interested, we can help with the scale side as well.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Arabella. Jump in.
Adam had what you're saying had me thinking about.
Yeah, me too.
Some people who, it's all great things. Some people, like including myself, I've been hesitant to call myself a mentor, and that's probably through the imposter syndrome. But one of the things, harkening back to my experience, I've worked with and was able to be slightly mentored, just learned from Stephen J. Cannell, who was an executive producer and writer of multiple 80s TV shows. And he did 21 Jump Street, The Commish, Silk Stockings. And one of the things that his story goes is that he was dyslexic. And so his whole life, he felt like he was stupid, until this one professor at school, where he was actually, not doing so well in school, told him that, I don't care if you can't spell, your stories are so incredible, your characters are so incredible, you got to keep doing it. So he went from this kid that believed he was stupid to this guy who was running Hollywood, right? And creating all these stories for everyone to experience. And so I think, for me, at least now, I'm more comfortable with being a mentor. I always think back to maybe a little bit of just a little tiny step of just encouragement to someone that may not be believing in themselves. And I feel like that goes a long way. But maybe, Nehemiah or Sarah or Adam, maybe you have more of like a tip for people who are more hesitant to become mentors, who should actually be mentors?
Well, when Adam was telling his story, what came to mind is so recently we were working with a patient and she consistently arrived late to the clinic. We were wondering, why does she keep arriving late? To the point that her attending physician said, "Oh, I can't work with her anymore." And having an open discussion with her, we find she's got several small children, a single parent of her own, has an hour commute to the clinic one way and back where she gets off of work. This discussion allowed us to see her in a new frame, a new reference of life. Thereby, of course, when it came time for us to treat her, now we're treating her a different way. Now we're able to commit a different level, administer a different level of care. In the same instance, in our corporate spheres, in our mentorship, Arabella, to circle back to your question, it first takes, once again, not to go on harp on this, an open discussion of where we overlap. When I hear Steph mention her story, there's an abundance of others who also say, I share in that. And it might not be an immediate raising of a hand, but it might be an email. It might be Steph outreaching. And something that Ian mentioned at the start is not to just, so I've been thinking this whole time, is how do we move away from identifying problems towards solutions? A major solution that we, being thought leaders, will have to consider is what is our role in reaching out to those who we know need our mentorship. Instead of waiting for someone to say, "Oh, I need a mentor," which I feel as though so rarely might occur, it's saying, "I see that you are like me. I see that you've gone through my struggles. I see that you're seeking to go on my path, and Arabella, you do it beautifully. So I'm going to reach out to you. I'm going to send you the email and say, here's how I could help be of assistance to you. Here's how I went through your time, and here's how I got there. Would you be interested in mentorship?" That builds the confidence on both sides, because you can imagine the dynamic. Arabella, you as a mentor, timid in its own, and a mentee is also. And so if we had taken the time in the clinic, not to keep laboring the point, the same way we would in the corporate sphere, to reach out and say, I see that you're struggling to get here on time. What is the barrier? I see that you're struggling to find confidence in your workspace. So Steph, what is the barrier? Then the mentor-mentee relationship becomes organic.
So we have about 5 minutes left, and I just want to give everyone a chance to share a bit more about the work that we're doing and to take these stories and continue to turn them into action. We've already covered that in spades, but Arabella, could we start with you? Maybe you could just talk about We Excel, what you're doing. There's some incredible work you're doing right now with women and non-binary engineers. Please share a bit about that and the stories that you are helping to tell going forward.
We're actually going to open it up to women and non-binary in tech. So, because we just feel like it's such a great program. So it's a free workshop on your hero's journey through the basics of animated film storytelling. And it's being taught by a filmmaker, animated filmmaker, Eunbi Chang. She is an immigrant from South Korea who's now here in the Bay Area. It's incredible. If you go to our website and go to Your Hero's Journey or weexl.org/hero, you can sign up for free. And it's just a short application process just to make sure that you're really serious about it. And the classes are very only for up to 24 people, but we will be live streaming it and recording it. But the whole point of that is to be able to really encourage women and non-binary in tech to share their stories. But then at the end of it all, our community is going to choose one to turn into an animated film directed by Eunbi Chang. So that's the little icing on the cake. Thank you, Ian, for letting me talk about it.
Of course, thank you.
Okay, yeah, Nehemiah, thanks Arabella for sharing. If you can quickly just go over what you're doing at Level the Playing Field, and then just what's going on with that. How is that being a vehicle of change?
Yeah, of course. So Level the Playing Field, as mentioned earlier, we connect primarily white institutions like UNC or Harvard, in the instance, with historically Black colleges like Howard or NCCU. We bring students together from both sides through a 3-phase 1-year program where we recruit, train, and place them into internships. This past year, our students went through workshops, and every single week for building a resume, learning how to network, was primarily in the instance of them being minorities. In the second semester, we actually designed a curriculum in combination with a professor in Oregon State, where they go through a little more rigorously. And finally, we place all of our students into paid internships with companies like Carbon 3D, Merck Pharmaceutical, and a few other companies in Silicon Valley who have partnered with us. We're now actively seeking more partners to join us as playing field levelers, which you can see in the packet that Ian sent out earlier.
Thanks, Nehemiah. Okay, Adam, maybe you could just share a little bit about My2B and kind of where you're going from here with the platform.
Sure. So with My2B, we're helping create equal opportunities for everyone through scaling mentoring and development across organizations. We've obviously had a very successful pilot with Box to the point where they've now expanded it across the organization. And we'd be more than happy to help anyone understand more about mentoring and also about scaling it across their organization. So feel free to get in touch.
Great, thank you. And Sarah, if you could, again, you talked about Tech Pact, maybe you could share a bit more about that, how organizations can get involved or, look to Tech Pact as an example, and anything else you'd like to share. And then we will close out with one final question from Joe.
Yeah, so definitely go to techpact.org. There are multiple ways to get engaged there: community engagement, partnership engagement. And I'll tell you that the conversations that need to be happening now at all organizations is around talent trends, representation at each level, pay trends, equity at each level, cultural trends, having these courageous conversations that you just heard about, actively listening and responding. And the things that I've heard so many terms here that organizations just need to be talking about: imposter syndrome, bamboo ceiling, glass ceiling. Those courageous conversations need to be happening at all organizations right now.
And then finally, we have a question from Joe asking, I'm going to try to paraphrase it. There's a lot of activity already happening looking at care for employees, supporting wellness. Obviously, with the pandemic, that's been a very important thing for us to focus on, as we're all home, or many of us are home, not all of us are home. Joe is asking, how do we go deeper into caring for employees with stories like Steph, where people may need different kinds of support, more support than the programs that we have already? So it's an open question if anybody wants to jump in with any reflection on that to close us out, and then we'll close.
I mean, from my point of view, I think it's the programs with a focus, like a particular focus area, can definitely have that and help that and bring people out of their shell. I think one of the things about setting up a program is setting out the parameters around it at the start. So saying things like, it's a safe space, you can have these conversations. If it is particular around that, then that can really help people to develop that. I think that's something, obviously, that was a great success that we've seen with the Box case with yourselves.
Terrific. Well, I'm going to finish. Steph will have the final word, but I want to thank all of the panelists for joining. You're all amazing people, and it's been a real pleasure to work with you on this and to have this conversation. So thank you all. Steph, thank you.
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining in today. As Ian mentioned, we would want to continue this conversation over on our event page on LinkedIn. And if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to Ian or I. We're on LinkedIn, we're within our respective organizations. But we hope you take this conversation and can act upon it. And I hope you all took a lot away from this conversation with our panelists as well. And we appreciate everyone's time and our panelists' time as well.
Thank you all. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.